Awesome. All right, good morning or good afternoon or good evening to everybody on this call. Thank you so much for joining this AMA here in the HubSpot operations community. With us today, we have, of course, Frans Leys and Ewout Meyns to talk more about Data Sync. Guys, I've already asked you, but let's hear it again. How are you guys feeling today?
I'm feeling great. Excited to be here today with all the folks from the community. Looking forward to all the questions coming in.
Yeah, likewise. It feels really good to be finally able to talk about operations of Data Sync out in the open after we've been working on it in secrecy. So I'm really looking forward to questions.
Yeah, I love to hear it. It's great having you in the community. To the people, everybody here in this call, just as an FYI, this isn't Ask Me Anything, so you can ask Ewout or Frans about anything you feel like. It doesn't necessarily need to be about Data Sync. Frans and Ewout are, of course, experts in the field of integrations, product, SaaS. Frans is laughing, but I know that he is. By definition, so there's really no wrong questions here. And whether you ask via chat or via audio, it really doesn't matter so long as you are comfortable. Before we begin, I'd like to briefly introduce these two fine gents. Some of you may know this, but Ewout and Frans and I already know each other for a couple of years. We were all PieSync employees before we actually became HubSpotters. Well, technically, we weren't all employees. Ewout was our CEO and co-founder. And then PieSync was acquired back in 2019. And we all joined HubSpot. Ewout is now the senior product manager for Data Sync and has been working the past year or so, I think, to repurpose the PieSync integrations engine into what is now known as Data Sync. And Frans has been helping him to do so. Frans is a go-to-market specialist for Operations Hub. And at PieSync, he was a solutions engineer, where he was basically the glue that kind of tied the whole PieSync vibe together, like marketing, business development, support, product, all that kind of stuff. Ewout, let's first talk a little bit more about yourself. Not everybody has that opportunity to become a CEO of a software company. How did you come to decide that you wanted to build like that integration engine and that company behind it?
Sure. I would love to tell an epic story here on how we dropped out of college to start PieSync, but that story would not be exactly true. The truth is that I met my co-founder and friend, Matthias Putman, 15 years ago, when we joined college to start studying computer science. 5 years later, we graduated and decided to join the same big consulting firm. And then I think a typical story happened. After a couple of weeks, we realized that a big company career wasn't really what was making us excited. So we decided to quit our jobs. And actually, back then, Matthias was already working on a small idea. Back in 2011, we were big fans of a company named 37 Signals. Some of you might know 37 Signals. Their Basecamp product is kind of famous. They also have a very popular CRM called HighRise. Well, back then it was extremely popular, was growing very fast. I think they had like hundreds of thousands of customers at that point in time. And one day, Matthias was just browsing the internet and he discovered their website and he noticed that their biggest feature request was actually a sync with Google Contacts, a two-way sync of contact data between the CRM and the mobile phone. Which actually makes sense because as a sales rep, you're working from your phone, you're updating contact details, and you want to definitely keep those in sync with the CRM system. It was the most popular requested feature, but apparently 37 Signals had no intention of actually building a solution, which was kind of interesting. So Matthias figured it couldn't be that hard to build a solution and started working on the first prototype. But yeah, very soon he realized syncing is actually a very hard problem, and there was probably a reason why 37 Signals was not building a solution. I mean, you need to be able to scan APIs for changes. You need to be able to compare data, make sure there are no duplicates, merge information together, all kinds of complex algorithms that needed to be built. So yeah, Matthias realized it was probably a big opportunity, but also a big problem. So that's why we decided to start focusing on this problem on a full-time basis, more or less 10 years ago. So I think it took us 6 months to get to that first working prototype, and definitely those first things were just failing and creating duplicates all over the place. But we managed to get to a fully working version of it, which immediately, like once we started communicating to the community that we have this solution available. Like quickly, tens, hundreds of companies started using it. We got a ton of feedback. And we also started realizing based on that feedback that it was not just a high-res Google problem, but it was actually a way bigger problem. Like many of our customers were using multiple different SaaS applications. It was 10 years ago, so the SaaS market looked quite different. Like today, there's tens of thousands of applications available. Back then, it was way smaller, but still like hundreds of applications on the market. And we started realizing like each of those applications had the same problem. Customers are using multiple of those, and there's no easy way to connect them and keep the data in sync. And that's why we started realizing we should solve this problem in a more generic way, build a generic sync engine. And also that's why we started talking with VCs and investors. So I think at 2014, we raised our first seed rounds, then started hiring our first colleagues. In 2016, our first venture capital round, a round of 1.5 million. And then in 2018, another round of 3 million euros. And through that time, using that venture capital, we were able to build a solid and strong team. We were growing from like 2 people to 30 people in a couple of years. We were also growing to like 150 to 200 applications by 2019. And also thousands of paying customers worldwide, and I think more than 50 different countries when HubSpot acquired us at the end of 2019.
Yeah, definitely like a success story, and I was happy to be on board in that story. But Frans, let's talk about you. You joined PieSync, of course. I don't think you started at the beginning, but you joined at a very pivotal moment. Can you talk more about like your career there and how you joined?
Less of an impressive track record as Ewout in founding a company. I joined about 10th or 11th employee when PieSync already in those 10 employees, I mean, I think half of it was basically developers really cracking that code of building a generic sync engine. And then we had one person on support, one person on marketing, and we had, I joined the business development team. What I really liked about PieSync at that point in time was its super simple premise, which in some way it kept, which is we make a two-way contact sync. That's it, plug and play. Very simple user interface, but of course at the back end of it, it's super complex. The business development team was actually more so doing partner enablement. We were having and adding one connector every week. That was basically defining the growth at PieSync, which was super exciting, right? Growth becomes something very tangible and visible when you launch a new connector every week. You increase your total addressable market every week. And yeah, this is what made PieSync grow. We sat on tons of data, figuring out what made us grow, what made some connectors grow more than others was actually the most challenging thing. And that's really what I felt I was contributing to the team. Like PieSync was solving two-way sync generically, but we then needed to understand what makes these CRMs click better than these ERP programs, what makes this specific combination of, say, HubSpot plus MailChimp more attractive than others, making sure that the marketing team was able to tell those stories more specifically, like app pairs, rather than just rehashing the same generic story of PieSync, two-way contact sync, try it out. Like make the story about PieSync a little bit more interesting. So I enjoyed that at the point in time where, yeah, 40 connectors we had back then, now we have 250. So yeah, the complexity of the product was really starting to transpire. So I helped with making sure that story didn't get lost.
Yeah, I still remember, I guess it was my first day on the support team at PieSync. I think you trained me on the product. I did. And one of the first things that you told me, or like you sketched like the picture of what the SaaS market's landscape was back then. And you used that Scott Brinker slide of all the different apps, all the different like ecosystems that those apps play a part in. And I think that was my first introduction to what HubSpot actually is. But HubSpot has always been kind of present, you know, either as an integration, of course, but also as inspiration. I think this is a good question for Ewout. Like, can you talk more about like, how did you look at like the relationship between HubSpot and PieSync, and how did that come into like fruition with the acquisition?
Yeah, I think we already became familiar with HubSpot back in 2012, around the time that we started PieSync. We were always inspired by HubSpot's inbound marketing strategy and thought leadership. Like from the very beginning, PieSync is a super easy to use tool. It's completely self-service, and it completely relies on inbound marketing. Like, and all the time, all those years, we never hired a single sales rep. The product was completely like no touch, driven by inbound marketing, inspired by HubSpot's methodologies for sure. Then I think in 2016 was when we started building the HubSpot connector. We started seeing the opportunity of integrating with a fast-growing platform as HubSpot. I still remember initially it was kind of hard to get in touch with HubSpot to start an actual partnership. I mean, they were kind of big. We were this small startup in Ghent, Belgium. So it took us a while to get on their radar. And I still remember the tipping point was like getting to 50 paying mutual customers. That was also an internal goal at PieSync, trying to get those 50 HubSpot customers. And like once we reached that number, we were able to reach out to HubSpot, and them seeing the usage already in a couple of months and seeing some great quotes from those customers really opened up the doors. We were invited to go to Dublin, to go to Boston, their offices, to start training their sales engineers. And I think that's when HubSpot internally started referring customers to PieSync, and when the HubSpot connector started becoming one of the most popular connectors on the PieSync platform. So I mean, in all that time, I think the HubSpot partnership, it was like growing month over month. We were getting in touch with more and more internal HubSpot folks on different levels within the company. So I think that really like helped the whole story of how PieSync got acquired by HubSpot. But to be honest, we didn't plan to get acquired in 2019. We were super focused on growing our company. We were about to sign a new funding round. Actually, we just opened a New York office. And we're in the middle of hiring a couple of US employees when all of a sudden HubSpot started knocking at the door. But of course, I mean, if you're a startup and you're backed by venture capital, you always need an exit strategy. And being acquired by a strategic partner was always one of the possible exit options. And I think there's probably a slide somewhere where HubSpot was already on that list of like potential exit strategies for PieSync. But it definitely all went faster than we were thinking it would happen. Like I think in 2019, focus was on growing the business and becoming that #1 integration platform in the market.
So I think Frans was probably thinking the same as I was. Like that New York office is such a distant memory by now.
I literally forgot. Like I was prepping for this, and I literally forgot that I lived for 1 month in New York, in a WeWork at PieSync Inc. office. Hiring somebody, and then the news came. I literally forgot about that moment.
Yeah, I mean,
that's right. You were there. Yeah,
I was there. Yeah,
you were there. Yeah, but like 2 of our colleagues probably did forget that. Like they actually decided to permanently move to New York, so they left their families almost. They left their cats, like one of our colleagues' stories. So they moved to New York, and unfortunately, 1 month later, that office got closed again because having an office in Boston and New York didn't really make sense at that time.
I guess not. So I guess that entire journey brings us back to, well, HubSpot acquiring PieSync and then you developing Data Sync. Data Sync, like I already mentioned, is built on the PieSync integration engine. We built a bit on HubSpot infrastructure, and it's basically a two-way real-time synchronization of customer data natively within HubSpot. And before I hand it over to the audience to ask their questions, can you talk a bit more about that journey, like the past 2 years, ever since that acquisition? Was it always the plan to build Data Sync, or like when and how was that decided?
Yeah, the past 2 years were definitely super exciting for the PieSync team. I'm personally very impressed with HubSpot company culture and how HubSpot has been managing the entire acquisition process. I think I can only conclude that the acquisition of PieSync was a big success, and I think proof of that is in the fact that not a single member of the PieSync team left the company, which is very rare after an acquisition. I think the entire PieSync team is cranking away. We're seeing very high employee NPS scores, and everyone is just very motivated to continue building out that sync vision. When we joined HubSpot, the plan was always to continue syncing, continue building out the sync engine, but also to start integrating the PieSync technology more deeply into the HubSpot platform. And I think that brings us to the story of Data Sync. So 2 weeks ago, Operations Hub launched a new hub, as you all know, to make the life of operations people easier. And Data Sync is a crucial part of Operations Hub, and it's completely built on top of that PieSync technology. So for me personally, it's very exciting to see our technology being distributed on a much larger scale. One of the important goals of Operations Hub is to make it easier than ever for your systems to work together, and Data Sync will definitely help Operations Hub achieve that goal. You can think of Data Sync, and that's a question in the chat. You can think of Data Sync as a powerful, easy to use sync engine built inside of HubSpot that will allow everyone to connect HubSpot with the rest of the world's business apps through a powerful two-way and real-time sync. If you're familiar with PieSync, it will feel kind of similar. It's a very easy to use product, and literally a couple of clicks, you can set up a powerful two-way sync with any of the apps we have available. Today, we have like 30 apps available in the marketplace, apps like Dynamics, NetSuite, Google Contacts, Outlook, but many more will be coming. Like we have more than 200 in the PieSync standalone, and many of those will come over to HubSpot as well.
You talked about the apps in the marketplace. That's also a bit of a different way than PieSync used to be, where you could connect any app. Like maybe that's a better question for Frans. Like, what were the decisions and the improvement made to the HubSpot marketplace to facilitate this new sync vision?
We indeed had to choose, like, where do we position a feature like Data Sync? And very early on, the marketplace seemed like the most logical place to be positioning Data Sync functionality, because sync is not new. PieSync was already available on the marketplace, so it made sense to just continue staying where we were. Now, as part of this launch of Data Sync listings, we also wanted to make sure that when we show a listing in the marketplace, that listing is super clear and transparent as to what the sync will do, as to what the sync will not do. I think that's super important to talk about on a marketplace listing. And I can actually just, if you don't mind, I'll just share my screen because it's probably sure. Easier to have something visible. So if you search for any app, you may now find these integrations, and then one app here that we have built by HubSpot, that's actually a Data Sync app. In fact, we also have a featured collection if you want to find that we now have these 30 results. But one thing that we've done on these listings is you won't find the typical super product marketing-y verbiage around, like I'm on a bullhorn listing right now. I can see Dan Sullivan waving because I remember having a good chat with Dan back in the day on PieSync when I wore my PieSync hat. Like, we could be presenting this as bullhorn and talking to bullhorn's capabilities as an excellent ATS, like an HR CRM. We're not. We're talking about what Sync does, what filters you can use, what the field mappings are. And in fact, we've gone so far as to include the field mappings that are part of a Sync. Like, what is the actual data that our integration or our Sync will be able to grab into? What are the objects and what are the field mappings? At PieSync, we were basically offering PieSync on many marketplaces, like not just HubSpot, but other marketplaces as well. I've never seen a marketplace actually go this deep, that actually like detail, to be upfront as to like, hey, this is data, this is what you'll get. So these marketplace listings basically are the source of truth. If you want to know, will this Sync actually solve my issue, or will it be at least part of the solve, or will I be needing to set up some other integrations, which you potentially do? So I'm really fond of these marketplace listings and how transparent we are on this.
Yeah, I think with that, I'm going to hand it over to the audience again. Feel free to put your questions in the chat, or if you feel comfortable, you can also just unmute your mic. I think we already have a couple of questions in the chat, so I'm just going to go through them. The first question was written directly to me by Jeff. He's talking about workflow triggers, and I'm not sure if this is the best place, but let's just hear him out. Any chance of adding changes as triggers, or do folks utilize update and last for doing this similar? Frans, maybe you can answer this question better. I think he might be referring to actual workflow triggers and not necessarily data sync, but.
Do you mind rephrasing the question? Because I want to make sure to get it right.
Jeff, are you still here? Maybe you could.
Yeah, I am.
Yeah.
So quickly, and again, I took the ask me anything quite literally.
Sure. Yeah.
I'm a fair newbie, and one of the issues that we're looking at with workflows is we want to trigger something when a property value changes, and we want to launch off a workflow. So I don't see anything that intuitively says it'll trigger when it changes. And so if that's a question for elsewhere, that's fine. But I just figured I'd toss it out there and get the ball rolling.
Workflows. So you can actually set up workflows indeed when those properties change. I think the typical, like, it depends on what property it is, but you can initiate workflows on like contacts, deals. Sync is actually like an integration mechanism where you don't have to worry about triggers at all. It's basically us proactively polling, and we're going to be looking for changes. And if the change happens, we'll propagate it over into the other app. So sync is sort of like the opposite of having to think through triggers. Now in workflows, you can indeed set up the initial start of a workflow is a trigger. It is. We could probably take this offline. It's sort of like a different subject matter altogether from sync. It's not my super specialization. I probably look into it, but we may want to tackle this offline if you don't mind.
Yeah, go ahead and move on. That's sorry about that.
It's an ask me anything. It's also I can answer anything as well, right?
Feel free to reach out to me in personally in the community, or I'll send you my email address later on, and I can connect you with some experts that might be able to help you a little bit better. But thanks for your question, Jeff. I think there was one question by Dan Rosier as well on how data sync actually works. I think this may be a good point for maybe Frans. Could you quickly set up a sync? Could you share your screen?
I'll do a 30-second demo of
okay.
Of data sync, because I've been making these screencast videos right now to put on the marketplace, and I'm literally setting up syncs within 30 seconds. It's the time that the video screencast lasts. So the one thing that I really like about data sync is that they all look alike. So I'm right now on a sync with ActiveCampaign. I could be on a sync with say Dynamics 365, and the visual language will always be the same. Here I'm about to set up a sync with Outreach, totally different app, but the same sync UX comes back, right? It's this idea where you tell what data you want to be kept in sync. By default, we start you off with a two-way sync. Take everything of HubSpot, throw it in my other app. Take everything from my other app, throw it into HubSpot. You can do that, or you can choose to be applying some sort of gates, some filters. Say that, well, I really want to like work off of this active list that I'm calling a sync inclusion list. So I'm in control of what contacts make it over into Outreach. Similarly, Outreach could be like a graveyard of fault contacts. You don't want to pollute HubSpot. Maybe you just want to filter on a certain owner on a certain stage in Outreach. That's the sync rules. So defining what makes it over. Hey, maybe you just want a one-way sync, right? Maybe all you need is getting certain, you're fetching contacts in HubSpot. You want to throw them into Outreach? Sure. You don't need the other way around. Just put this to no, and then it becomes a one-way sync. So rules, very straightforward. And then you have to think about field mappings. So in these field mappings, it's about, well, obviously I have a one-way sync right now. Let me just put that back to two-way sync. So the two-way sync, it's about, well, what fields should communicate with one another. The default mappings is always going to be names, emails, addresses, phones. If you can find a way to just map these magically for you, we will. And this is what you get in the free tier. If you upgrade the Operations Hub Starter, which is a $50 price that's added onto your portal, you actually have the ability just customize the existing field mappings with add field mappings, which allows you to then, take HubSpot specific information and throw it into your other app, or vice versa. If you have these custom fields or these outreach specific fields or these bullhorn specific fields, and you want to push them into HubSpot, you can. That's what field mapping is. Once you're happy with this, you just basically fire up the sync. It will do an initial import, right? So it's going to make sure that to create contacts if they didn't exist yet. It's going to update existing ones. It's going to find matches on the basis of email. That may take a while. If you have a huge database, I remember with Dan, it took a while because the database could be considerable. But after that, it's basically just syncing the delta, right? Whatever's changed. And basically, if something changes in HubSpot, it says 5-10 minutes. That's us being super careful. It just instantly syncs over to the other app. A change happening in your other app takes 5 to 10 minutes before we pick it up, and we will apply that change in HubSpot. That's it. That's what data sync is.
Yeah, super easy, I think, to set that up. And I think one of the improvements that we saw with data sync versus PieSync is that with PieSync, you always had to wait around 5 minutes for a change. And now we say the same, but it's really instantaneous that data syncs are changed from HubSpot to the other app, which is just, I think it's amazing. Rod asked us a question: is deal sync on the roadmap? Ewout.
I'm happy to answer that question. Definitely got some good news there, without making any promises around dates. But if we're looking at like what kind of features we're going to build next, supporting more objects is a very big one for us. Today it's only contact data, but stay tuned, because like company syncing will be out there very soon, and we're already working on supporting other objects like deals, tickets, products as well. I would say first company syncing, then deal syncing, and the rest will follow later on. Stay tuned. And that's kind of exciting, because those features were never part of the PieSync standalone. I think they were mostly requested features and the PieSync standalone supporting more objects. It requires a whole other level of syncing. Like initially, in the beginning of this AMA already told about the complexity of building a sync. Just building a contact sync is already very complex, but then trying to build a sync where you're keeping different objects in sync, but then also the associations between those objects, because like a deal is associated with a company or associated with a contact record. That's like a whole other level of complexity, because you need to keep those objects in sync, keep those associations in sync. But yeah, we managed to build that internally. The whole sync engine is ready to support those kind of object syncing. So more exciting stuff coming later this year.
Definitely. Frans, I think I have a question for you as well by Paul, using Zendesk as an example, where you have an integration built by HubSpot and you have already an integration built by another provider. Can you discuss considerations to transition, and will the other built by vendor X, where HubSpot has built an integration, continue to exist?
They will continue to exist. I mean, I'm going to use Zendesk as an example. I happen to be familiar with the Zendesk integration in that it does two things. It creates, it essentially does one thing. It pushes the ticket that you have in Zendesk. It pushes that into HubSpot. Now, to push a ticket into HubSpot, you actually need to, you can only like push a conversation into HubSpot if you have an actual contact to attach it to. So that integration by Zendesk may or may not actually create a contact record in HubSpot. The Zendesk sync that we've built is not pushing tickets at all, but it is doing a two-way sync of the contact record that you have in Zendesk or in HubSpot. And in fact, we notice many users have been just using both integrations complementarily, because they need a way to push those tickets into HubSpot. But the integration built by Zendesk actually just makes a contact record with just the email address. It doesn't sync over first name, it doesn't sync over last name. You can be syncing your custom properties, it doesn't include tags. So it does like a very minimal sync. So data sync or PieSync acts as this complement to make sure that the sync gets richer and gets more complete. So right now, these integrations do different things. So they're fine to be kept as is on the marketplace. The ecosystem is an ecosystem, so it is alive. Integrations may come and may go. I think we've built Data Sync right now as like an internal way within HubSpot to like build integrations. But we are definitely looking forward to make sure that Data Sync becomes a part of more integrations that not just built by HubSpot, right? So it may evolve over time. Right now, Data Sync integrations do this foundational sync of properties on the contact object, and the ecosystem has plenty of integrations that do much more use case driven event-like things that can just sit on top of Data Sync. Hopefully that is already an answer.
Yeah.
Paul's question.
If you have any follow-up, just let us know. Speaking of events, Alicia had another question. Do you have an EDA on Data Sync for Eventbrite? And I think we can also add Neil's question to that. Is there a roadmap for apps coming on board to Data Sync?
There's actually an interesting take. Like every app is different. So for Eventbrite, the interesting thing is we had a PieSync integration for Eventbrite, which would take the attendees of an event and it would sync them to any app. In deciding which apps do we like immediately put on Data Sync, we sort of consciously omitted Eventbrite from that list, because there is already an Eventbrite integration, as far as I know, available for HubSpot, which would do pretty much the same thing, unless it's no longer out there. If there was something specific about the PieSync integration that syncs Eventbrite attendees in a way that the current integration does not, we're happy to look into this. But for Eventbrite, our take was actually not so much to release it, because we already have like a perfectly working integration. Do let me know on the ideas forum or offline. I guess in the thread of this event, people can leave like extra questions, right? So
in the community,
now the other question was just like general roadmap of apps coming. That is obviously a question that we could expect. We cannot be exact in like which apps we are releasing. That's a legal thing. But there is one thing that we can be open about, and that is, well, we currently have 30 apps out there in the marketplace, whereas PieSync had 250 connectors released. So obviously our work is not yet completely done. We have plenty of PieSync apps. Like the code is basically needs to be a little bit like retrofitted within a HubSpot interface, and then it's ready to go. So we're keen to get those connectors also on the Data Sync platform. Now, since there are 250 connectors and there's only so much hands that we have, we'll get there. But I've actually made sure that on the ideas forum, if you search for the app that you've been using in PieSync, or if you even search for Data Sync, you'll find a bunch of apps in there. Give them a little upvote, or feel free to leave a comment with your particular use case, and I'll make sure we'll get to that well before the end of the year.
Yeah, and to add to that, Neil also mentioned that there are some things that the Zoho integration on PieSync does that Data Sync currently does not. Where are you there? Will you be adding those extra functionalities? Neil, if you could be more specific, I'm not sure if you've already responded. You can unmute or just put it in the chat on what kind of functionalities you would like to have extra to Data Sync. Just let us know.
No, that's fine. No, that's answered my question. It was just the fact that there was 250 integrations in PieSync, and why it was not appearing in Data Sync. But no, that's answered my question. Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks. And then we have a question by Uma. How is MailChimp via Data Sync different from MailChimp integrated via the HubSpot marketplace? Is it the same, or what is like the difference there?
Oh yeah, no, Ewout, go ahead. I've been talking for too much.
No, Frans, you were saying all the right things, so that was perfect. No, and I think there's a similar question around like there's an existing Salesforce integration built by HubSpot. What is the plan with that integration? I think it's kind of similar. Indeed, the MailChimp integration that HubSpot already had, it was already built before the PieSync acquisition. It's still available in the marketplace. Specifically, that one is kind of interesting. Frans can talk a bit more on that, but actually you could use that integration complementary, like in combination with the data sync integration. Like we're providing a full two-way sync of data between MailChimp and HubSpot. While I think the other HubSpot build integration, it has like a one-way sync, but it's also syncing email activity, which our data sync is not doing. So just using those at the same time is perfectly possible today. I would say like longer term vision for us is definitely to make sure that all syncs are running on the same engine. So are running on the data sync engines, just so that we can provide you all the same familiar interface for all your different integrations, so that not for every app that you want to connect, you need to use another interface or need to think about the specifics of that specific sync. Because using data sync, it's almost a promise that we're making. If you're using data syncs, you just know that like every sync will just work the same way. You can configure it the same way. If you know how to set up one sync, you'll be able to set up the other syncs, and that's kind of powerful. To answer the other question about Salesforce, of course, HubSpot has already a very, very powerful Salesforce integration out there in the market. So there's no plans to sunset that integration in favor of data sync. Definitely not until the point that data sync is as powerful as the existing Salesforce sync, which includes things like custom object syncing and some more advanced features that we don't yet have available in the data sync product. So yeah, short answer for no, you might see some apps showing up twice. There might be a good reason for that. Longer term, there will probably be one HubSpot build integration per application available.
To add on that, Ewout, I think like we obviously, this is like a thing that we've discussed often internally. Like it doesn't feel very HubSpot-y to be having like similar-ish integrations side by side. We feel that we can be doing better, but then again, the ecosystem has this wide variety of integrations, right? And HubSpot is just one partner that actually builds integrations. So the reason why we're on the marketplace is to offer choice. So we want to build a great sync, but there are many app partners out there that have also built syncs, that have also built ways to help integrate MailChimp. So it's all about offering choice. So yeah, we had this legacy connector of MailChimp still around, which does its job as advertised. Like many people are using it. We wouldn't want to take it away. So people have the choice to be installing that one. It so happens that you can be installing data sync alongside this integration. So that's great. But you could be installing other integrations as well that are non-HubSpot built alongside data sync, keeping in mind certain elements like data sync will create contacts, it will update records. So if the other integration also is like a very super clear sync, we sync contacts, we also update records, well, then obviously there's going to be somewhat of a data overlap. So it's best to avoid that. But typically integrations will do different things. They will like create, like write stuff to the timeline, and integrations like those are yeah, almost harmless to be using alongside data sync, which really acts. It doesn't touch the timeline. It touches the contact record. It touches the properties of the contact.
That makes sense. I hope that answers your question. Caitlin also asked a question: what sort of triggers or restrictions can you use to make sure that only the contacts that you want to sync over to NetSuite end up there or in other systems? Do you have any tips there?
Yeah, I would say like Frans just gave us a quick demo of how data sync is working. Part of the demo was showing you the filtering components. So on each site, you can define a filter, and that will make sure you only sync the contacts you actually want to sync. On the HubSpot side, currently filtering is based on active lists, which is kind of powerful. You can just create a special active list, like Frans created a sync inclusion list, which is a custom-made active list that is just filtering out all the contacts that you would like to sync. And as you know, active lists are kind of powerful. You can do all kinds of filtering combinations to determine that filter. So that's the HubSpot side. And then on the other side, the other app, there's also an extensive list of possible features that we're offering, filters that we're offering. For example, you can filter on any value of any default or custom property in the other app. If the other app has lists available or tags available, you could use those lists or tags to filter out your contacts. Currently, you can only select one filter on each site. Just so you know, part of our roadmap is making our sync more powerful. And with making it more powerful, we mean offering more filtering possibilities, more mapping possibilities. So if you're in need of like more than one filter or want to do a combination of filters, stay tuned. There's more magic coming to Data Sync.
That's good news. Nathaniel also had a question. If you turn on the sync on a free version and then upgrade to a paid version later, what's the process there for updating field mapping for those fields that are now available?
I'm happy to take this. So the nice thing about sync and mappings is that you can make these changes on a running sync. It's one thing I've posted this post on the community, like a bit tips and tricks. And one of the tips is when you just first start out with a sync, just fire off the sync without any mappings, just to see what it looks like. And then try one mapping, and the sync will actually just basically like merge in your changes. You're not happy with that mapping, go ahead and change it. The sync will retroactively pick back up, reapply those changes that it needs to. This is like a different mindset than thinking through setting up a trigger action type of integration with Zapier, right? Where you have to like think through the steps from left to right. This is basically field mappings is this very fluid, dynamic thing where you can just be declaratively setting, okay, a contact in my other app needs to be looking like this in HubSpot and vice versa. And you can just make those changes. So, and when you upgrade, you obviously like keep your sync state alive, so you'll be seeing that. The free version doesn't allow you to change the mappings. So it's once you upgrade, you actually get control over those switches to remove mappings and to add new ones.
Right. I hope that answered your question, Nathaniel. Then there's a question by Ian. I'm currently running I think it's 20K contact plus sync for a client via PieSync and Intercom. Should I just move that over or leave it as is, understanding that Intercom will be shut down by the end of 2021? I think he means the Intercom connect. Yeah. What is the advantage, if any, for moving now to the native HubSpot integration?
I think one advantage if you're running a 20,000 contact sync might be pricing. Data Sync has an incredible, valuable free tier, which PieSync never had before. So on the free Data Sync tier, you can actually sync an unlimited amount of contacts, also connect with an unlimited amount of apps. So that's kind of exciting. The only limitation of the free tier are custom field mappings, but even then, if you're using custom field mappings, it's only $50 a month. So chances are high that Data Sync will be a lot cheaper than the PieSync. Similar setup for a 20,000 contact sync. I mean, that's one advantage. I would say second advantage is like it all happens inside your HubSpot portal. It will be like part of your HubSpot settings. You don't need to go to a third-party app anymore to configure your syncs. But of course, it's up to you if you want to continue using the PieSync standalone until the end of the year. That's perfectly fine. It will stay around. We'll be giving you still quite some time until the end of the year to migrate all your syncs over.
Adding on that, you could just try it out and see if it works in Data Sync by setting up like a limited filter, a different filter, syncing a couple of other contacts. That if you like are in control of the filters, you can see whether it works the same way that you want it to work in PieSync. Because there's slight differences between how you set up and how you declare these sync rules in PieSync over in HubSpot. It will still evolve as like throughout 2021. So maybe you can actually like move over today and stop paying for PieSync. Maybe we still need to make some small changes into Data Sync before it becomes possible.
One best practice there would just be to not run your Data Sync and your PieSync sync in parallel. That might like mix
but
up
on
your
a
data
different
a little
segment,
bit.
I mean, like a different
different segment would be perfectly fine. Yeah.
All right, there's a question by Kayla. Is Smartsheet on your planned list for expansion? And I think I can tag Jeff's question to that as well. I'm not super familiar with Smartsheet, but it might also be like a very free form kind of tool. And Jeff is asking whether we're planning on adding integrations directly to SQL server tables which is also very free form.
But they're both apps that we do not yet support. We didn't yet support them on PieSync either. We will obviously be looking into adding new connectors. Right now, we're 100% focused on making sure that the PieSync connectors can get onboarded, because they have plenty of folks waiting to get their hands onto Data Sync. It's just that we don't have their connector yet. Smartsheet, I think we actually have an Airtable. I hope Smartsheet is somewhat similar to Airtable. It looks just I don't know all the apps. Like it looks like sort of spreadsheety Google Sheets. Maybe
you do know all the apps, Frans. I'm pretty sure you do know all the apps.
One thing to keep in mind about Smartsheet, and actually I'll tag in the SQL question as well. Like when the app is, as Jan says, free form, meaning you are completely designing the table on your own, that makes it trickier for us to be building async, because in building async, we do expect a certain predictability in an object schema. Basically allowing, when an app allows for full flexibility, like which is what you would get in an SQL table, it makes it a little bit trickier for us. We like a certain degree of predictability in an app. The added complexity with supporting an SQL server table would be, in terms of performance, we are not, I don't think we can confidently like support syncing an SQL database of like a huge size. I think with or you may be expecting certain performance from a sync that you would be getting from like other SQL types of operations. So I don't think we're ready to tackle SQL type interfaces yet. In terms of, we may be like, I mean, there's other solutions for this than what Data Sync wants to solve. I completely botched my reply on that. Ewout, maybe you have a more condensed way of replying.
No, I kind of agree. Like we're so focused now on just supporting all those different SaaS apps in the market, and making sure we have like a full Data Sync with all of them available. Somehow we can probably see how our roadmap might evolve towards even syncing with databases and giving even more flexibility in how you configure a sync, but definitely not on the direct roadmap. Can I jump to another question, Jan, that I'm seeing in the chat?
Sure.
Definitely want to make sure we answer. As we're saying, like SQL syncing is not on the direct roadmap. There's a question from Kaela, I believe. Just to double check that company and deal syncing as on the direct roadmap, which I can definitely confirm. It's a big priority for us to get company and deal syncing out there. And as mentioned, it's been in the works for years, just upgrading our sync engine, being able to sync with multiple objects and those associations. It's a hard problem. We managed to solve it, and we're ready to start getting into those features as well. So very hard to give an exact ETA here, of course, but definitely upcoming in the short term.
Kasishi mentions that Smartsheet actually had been on PieSync's roadmap. So we had indeed had this large list of apps that we do want, where basically on our PieSync website, we registered votes. We wanted to gauge interest. Like the important thing about PieSync and about Data Sync as well is we're building the integration. So we're only gonna like put time and effort into this if we know that there's actual demand sitting on the other side of it. So if we are definitely like going to look at the demand that we got for PieSync connectors and help us inform as to what integrations we need to build for Data Sync as well.
I think Neil asked a very important question, but before we answer that one, let's answer Parker's first. Beyond companies and deals with activity syncing, is that also on the roadmap, basically?
That's an interesting question. So activity syncing is more like what we think of event syncing. It's not really syncing objects. It's more like syncing an immutable data. I would say it's on our radar. It's not on the direct roadmap. Like direct roadmap are like supporting all those other objects within HubSpot, then even supporting custom objects, which will be super powerful. Event syncing is a little bit of a special one. It's definitely on our radar, but not on our direct roadmap, I would say.
All right. And we're almost at time. Let's finish off with Neil's question. What is your favorite Belgian beer? Let's start with you, Ewout, and then we can head over to Frans.
Oh, there's so many amazing Belgian beers. For like past couple of years, Omer was my most favorite one, but I recently switched to Cornet. Maybe Jan, we should put the names in the chat. It's hard to explain or like pronounce them in English.
Just Omer, Cornet.
Tripper Carmelit is one that you should mention as well, because that one has like one of my most favorite glasses. If I need to choose the beer based on the glass, I would choose Triple Carmelit. But yeah, typically I choose the beer based on the beer. Cornet, I would say that's my favorite one at this very moment.
Okay, Frans.
Cornet comes with this like oaky aftertaste. I actually have to do similar taste like Omer and Triple Carmelit. My favorite beer is it's a beer called Wolf. You can find it in some Belgian supermarkets. It actually has a similar glass to Triple Carmelit. So for those who don't know, every single beer in Belgium comes with its proper glass. It's blasphemy if you were to pour, say, a Duvel in like the wrong glass. It's not done. Like I always in the States, this is totally different. You just get like the random glass, and it doesn't. What's inside is what matters. Not so in Belgium. Beer culture is pretty important. You have to get the right glass. So Yo actually like mentions Quack, and this is I did not. Yo is a colleague of mine. Quack has this really amazing glass which cannot stand on its own, and it is in fact it's become one of my favorite Belgian beers. I always found it a very gimmicky thing. It's a glass that cannot stand on its own. You actually have to like have a wooden holder to hold the glass. But the beer is amazing. It's got this like subtle sweet. It's like an amber beer. It's subtle sweet. None of that floral shizzle. It's just like an ale, but like a very light sweet aftertaste. And I really love it. And it's called Quack because of the shape of the glass. It basically makes a quack sound as soon as you take a big gulp.
Yeah, I think I'm not sure if I should add, but I'm a straight Duvel man. I love myself just a Duvel, whether it's an IPA or just a normal one. There's a high alcohol percentage, so yeah, it's very easy to get a buzz going. I think with that we can. I think there was one more thing we wanted to do, Frans. Maybe. Do you feel comfortable?
Yeah, I did. I got a question by Jana Balster. I don't know if she's oh, she is here. So she did queue a question on LinkedIn, which was to actually write a song about data sync. So I took up that challenge and I actually wrote a song about data sync. So I'll go ahead and do that right now, sort of to close us off, right? It's so I wrote the lyrics, but the music is written by this New York singer-songwriter by the name of Louise Ciccone. She now goes by the name of Madonna. I don't know if you've heard of her. So you've got contacts, you've got data into many apps. They're all over the place. They're not kept up to date. You've reached out to your IT crew. You've asked them to please fix it. They answered they could maybe one day patch things up, but it would take about 2 years to build. Budget will be through the roof. Oh, it'll be just one way from this one app into HubSpot. And of course, if you decide to switch tools, we just have to rebuild the entire integration again. Is that cool? No. When you need to wait, a data sync might work. A data sync might work. Simply plug, simply play. Data sync might work in operations of connectivity is what the world needs now. Filters, rules, and field mappings, and it's cheap, that's best of all. Sure, there's things like Zapier, it could do the craziest thing. But it doesn't make you happier, cause it is not really a thing. At HubSpot, we've built something incredible. When you need to wait, data sync might work. Data sync my work. Ooh, simply plug, simply play. Data sync my work. And operations up. Operations up. So I answered that question, Jana. Are there any other questions?
Oh man, that's amazing.
I'm very impressed, Frans. Very impressed.
Oh man,
He's
that
a
was awesome.
star.
I think with that we can close off this AMA. Thanks everyone for joining and for having this great conversation with Frans and Ewout on Data Sync. I hope we were able to answer all your questions. If we weren't, please leave them just in the HubSpot Ops community in the event. I'll make sure that Frans and Ewout are there to answer them. And if you want to reach out to them directly, you can also just hit them up on LinkedIn or slide in their DMs. You know how it goes. Thanks so much for being here, and thanks Ewout, thanks Frans. See you all next time. Have a great rest of your day. Bye.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Frans.